1924. British explorer Frederick Mitchell Hedges claims his teenage daughter discovered a perfect crystal skull buried beneath a Maya temple in Belize. A skull so flawless that experts declared it impossible to create with ancient tools. The discovery made headlines worldwide. Museums paid fortunes for similar skulls. Psychics claimed they channeled ancient wisdom through them. Hollywood made movies about their mystical powers. There was just one problem. It was all a lie. The crystal skulls weren't ancient Maya artifacts. They were 19th century fakes created by German forgers and sold to gullible museums and collectors for enormous profits. And when science finally exposed the truth, the institutions that had been fooled tried desperately to cover up their embarrassment. By the end of this video, you'll understand how crystal skulls became one of archaeology's greatest hoaxes, how they fooled the world's most prestigious museums, and why people still believe in their mystical powers despite overwhelming scientific evidence proving they're fake. But first, if archaeological frauds that exposed how easily experts can be manipulated fascinate you, hit that subscribe button. This story reveals the dark side of the museum world. The most famous crystal skull is known as the Mitchell Hedges skull, and its origin story changed more times than a politician's promises. Version 1. Frederick Mitchell Hedges, a British adventurer and treasure hunter, claimed his adopted daughter Anna found the skull on her 17th birthday in 1924 while exploring the ancient Maya city of Lebanton in Belize. According to Anna's account, she was searching through temple ruins when she spotted something glittering through a crack in the stone. After weeks of excavation, she pulled out a perfect crystal skull weighing 11.7 pounds, carved from a single block of clear quartz. The skull was anatomically accurate, with a detachable jaw that moved on hidden hinges. It seemed to glow with internal light. Paranormal investigators immediately declared it possessed supernatural properties. But here's the problem. Expedition records from Lebanton mention no crystal skull discovery. The archaeologists who accompanied Mitchell Hedges never mentioned it. No photographs from the expedition show the skull. It simply doesn't appear in any documentation until the 1930s. Researchers eventually discovered the real story. Mitchell Hedges purchased the skull at a Sotheby's auction in London in 1943 for £400. The auction house listed it as a rock crystal skull of unknown origin, not an ancient Maya artifact. Despite this evidence, Anna Mitchell Hedges spent the rest of her life touring with the skull, charging admission for people to see it, and selling books about its mystical properties. She claimed it was 3,600 years old and had been carved by ancient Atlanteans. She died in 2007, never admitting the skull was anything but genuine. The skull was eventually sold to a private collector and remains hidden from scientific analysis. If you're already seeing the pattern of lies, exaggeration, and profit-driven deception, show some love with a like. The fraud goes much deeper than one family's treasure hunting story. The Mitchell Hedges skull wasn't unique. By the early 20th century, several crystal skulls had appeared in museum collections worldwide, all with suspicious origins and no credible archaeological provenance. The British Museum skull in 1897, the British Museum purchased a crystal skull from Tiffany & Company, the famous New York jewelry store, for £120. The seller claimed it came from Mexico and represented Aztec craftsmanship. Think about that for a moment. A supposedly priceless ancient artifact was being sold by a jewelry store like it was a diamond necklace. No archaeological context, no excavation records, just a sales transaction. The museum displayed it prominently for decades as an authentic pre-Columbian artifact. The Smithsonian skull. The Smithsonian Institution acquired their crystal skull in 1960 through an anonymous donation. The donor provided no information about where it came from or how they obtained it. Again, no provenance, no archaeological context, no scientific documentation. Just an anonymous gift that the museum accepted without serious scrutiny. The Paris Museum skull, the Musée du Quai Branly in Paris, displayed a crystal skull claimed to be of Aztec origin. Like the others, its provenance was murky at best, with the acquisition trail leading back to 19th century antiquities dealers rather than legitimate archaeological excavations. Why museums accepted them? Here's the dark truth. Museums wanted these skulls to be real. They attracted visitors, generated donations, and created spectacular exhibitions. Crystal skulls were good for business. So museum curators didn't ask hard questions about provenance. They didn't demand archaeological documentation. They didn't question why these ancient artifacts were all appearing through commercial dealers rather than scientific excavations. They wanted to believe, so they chose to believe. And in doing so, they got conned. In the 1990s, scientists finally applied modern analytical techniques to the crystal skulls. What they discovered destroyed the skull's reputation as ancient artifacts. Dr. Jane McLaren Walsh, the skull hunter Dr. Walsh, an anthropologist at the Smithsonian, became obsessed with investigating the crystal skulls after noticing inconsistencies in their supposed histories. Using scanning electron microscopy, Walsh examined the Smithsonian skull's surface at extreme magnification. What she found was damning. Clear evidence of rotary wheel cutting. Ancient Maya and Aztec craftsmen worked crystal using abrasive slurries and hand tools. This process leaves distinctive scratch patterns, irregular marks that follow the hand movements of the craftsman. The crystal skulls showed perfectly regular, parallel marks consistent with rotary wheel cutting, a technique that wasn't developed until the 19th century and wasn't available to pre-Columbian civilizations. The British Museum investigation independently. The British Museum conducted electron microscopy analysis on their skull and reached identical conclusions. Dr. Margaret Sachs, the museum's conservation scientist, found that the skull had been manufactured using tools and techniques available in 19th century Europe, but completely unknown to ancient Mesoamerican cultures. She also analyzed the quartz crystal itself and discovered it didn't match any known sources from Mexico or Central America. The crystal appeared to be Brazilian quartz, commonly available in 19th century European workshops. The crushing verdict in 2008, both the British Museum and the Smithsonian issued official statements. Their crystal skulls were modern fakes, created in the 19th century using industrial tools. The institutions that had displayed these objects as priceless ancient artifacts for decades now had to admit they'd been fooled. The crystal skulls were removed from main exhibitions and reclassified as examples of 19th century fabrications. Here's what I find most revealing. It took nearly 100 years for museums to seriously investigate these objects. Why? Because sometimes institutions prefer comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths. What other museum artifacts might be fakes that haven't been seriously investigated? Share your thoughts in the comments. If the crystal skulls are 19th century fakes, who made them? The evidence points to a sophisticated network of forgers operating in Germany at Idar-Oberstein, the forger's paradise in the 19th century. The German town of Idar-Oberstein was the world's center for gem cutting and crystal carving. The town had everything needed to create fake artifacts. Access to Brazilian quartz crystal master craftsmen skilled in precision carving, the latest lapidary technology, including rotary wheels, connections to the international antiquities market, creating fake pre-Columbian artifacts was incredibly profitable. A crystal skull could sell for the equivalent of hundreds of thousands of dollars in today's money. For skilled craftsmen, it was irresistible. Eugene Bobin, the middleman, the key figure connecting German forgers to international buyers, was Eugene Bobin, a French antiquities dealer with shops in Paris and Mexico City. Bobin sold the British Museum their skull. He's connected to several other crystal skulls that appeared in European collections. And he had direct business relationships with German gem-cutting workshops that in the 1880s. Bobin was exposed attempting to sell fake pre-Columbian artifacts. He fled Mexico and eventually his business collapsed. But by then, he'd already sold numerous crystal skulls and other forgeries to museums and private collectors. The manufacturing process modern researchers believe the crystal skulls were created using this process. Source: Brazilian quartz crystal blocks, rough shape using diamond-tipped saws, 19th century technology. Refined shape using rotary grinding wheels, Polish using industrial abrasives, create anatomical details using precision carving tools, final polish to create the mysterious glow effect. Crystal skulls are technically impressive. They demonstrate exceptional 19th century craftsmanship. They're just not ancient artifacts. They're Victorian-era art forgeries. Despite overwhelming scientific evidence that crystal skulls are modern fakes, millions of people continue believing they're ancient artifacts with mystical powers. Why? The New Age movement in the 1970s and 80s. The New Age movement adopted crystal skulls as spiritual objects, claiming they contain ancient wisdom, can heal illness, channel alien intelligence, predict the future, hold the secrets of Atlantis. Crystal skull channelers charge money for sessions where they claim to communicate with ancient spirits through the skulls. Books about crystal skull mysticism become bestsellers. Tours and conferences generate millions in revenue. The rejection of science: when scientific analysis proved the skulls were fake, believers didn't change their minds. Instead, they rejected the science. Common arguments include: scientists are closed-minded, materialist museums are hiding the truth, ancient peoples had technology we don't understand, the energy can't be measured by modern instruments, this is cognitive dissonance in action. When evidence contradicts deeply held beliefs, people often reject the evidence rather than change the beliefs. It's psychologically easier to believe in a conspiracy than to admit you were wrong. Hollywood reinforcement: the 2008 film Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull presented crystal skulls as genuine ancient artifacts with mystical properties, introducing the myth to a new generation. Despite being fiction, the movie reinforced public perception that crystal skulls are mysterious ancient objects. Many viewers left theaters convinced the skulls were real, regardless of what science said. The tourism industry in Mexico and Central America: crystal skulls have become tourist attractions. Gift shops sell replicas. Tour guides tell elaborate stories about their ancient origins and mystical powers. Entire businesses depend on maintaining the crystal skull myth. Admitting their 19th century fakes would hurt tourism revenue, so local industries have financial incentives to perpetuate the legend. Modern skull production today: manufacturers produce thousands of crystal skulls for the spiritual/New Age market. These modern replicas are openly sold as contemporary objects, yet many buyers believe they possess ancient energy or mystical properties. New crystal skulls are constantly entering circulation, each with elaborate backstories about mysterious discoveries. The fraud that began in the 19th century continues in the 21st. The crystal skull hoax teaches us disturbing lessons about how easily we can be manipulated by beautiful lies. Lesson 1. Expertise is no protection. The British Museum and Smithsonian Institution employed world-class archaeologists and curators. They still got fooled for decades. Credentials and expertise don't make you immune to deception. If the world's leading museums can be conned, what chance do ordinary people have? The crystal skulls prove that even experts make mistakes when they want something to be true. Lesson 2. Provenance matters more than beauty. The crystal skulls are technically impressive objects. They're beautiful, intriguing, and mysterious. But none of that makes them ancient. In archaeology, provenance, the documented history of where an object came from, is everything. Without proper archaeological context, even the most impressive artifact should be treated with extreme skepticism. The museums failed this basic principle because the skulls were too beautiful, too exciting, too good for business to question seriously. Lesson 3. Profitable lies never die even after being definitively exposed as fakes. Crystal skulls remain popular and profitable. Books, tours, healing sessions, and merchandise generate millions of dollars annually. Once a profitable myth is established, it becomes nearly impossible to kill, regardless of evidence. People have financial, emotional, and psychological investments in maintaining the lie. Lesson 4. We want mysteries. The crystal skulls succeeded because people want to believe in ancient mysteries, lost civilizations, and mystical artifacts. We're hardwired to find meaning in mystery. This makes us vulnerable to fraud. Con artists and forgers understand that human desire for the mysterious and ancient can override critical thinking. The real mystery, ironically, the crystal skulls contain a genuine mystery. Not who made them in ancient times, but how did such obvious fakes fool so many people for so long? The crystal skulls are monuments to human gullibility, institutional failure, and the power of beautiful lies. They prove that in the battle between truth and myth, myth often wins, especially when the myth is more profitable. The crystal skulls aren't ancient Maya artifacts. They're not Atlantean technology. They're not mystical objects channeling ancient wisdom. They're 19th century forgeries created by German craftsmen and sold to gullible museums and collectors for profit. Science has proven this beyond any reasonable doubt. Electron microscopy, materials analysis, and historical research all point to the same conclusion. The crystal skulls are Victorian-era fakes. Yet millions still believe in their mystical powers. The myth persists because people want it to be true, because it's profitable, and because beautiful lies are always more appealing than boring truths. The crystal skulls remind us that in a world of misinformation, we must be constantly skeptical, demand evidence, and question beautiful stories that seem too perfect to be true. Because somewhere, right now, the next crystal skull hoax is being created, a new beautiful lie designed to fool the next generation of believers. If this expose of archaeological fraud has opened your eyes to how easily even experts can be deceived, smash that like button and subscribe for more investigations into history's greatest hoaxes and mysteries. And here's my question. If the crystal skulls fooled major museums for a century, what other ancient artifacts in museums today might actually be modern fakes? Share your suspicions in the comments below. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss it. Until then, remember, if something seems too mysterious, too perfect, too ancient to be true, it probably is. Question everything, demand evidence, and never let a beautiful story override critical thinking.